The summer of 1970 was loud. Not just loud because of the engines, loud because Detroit was at war with itself. Every automaker wanted the same crown, the biggest horsepower number, the fastest quarter-mile time, the most intimidating muscle car on the street. Chevrolet had its LS6 454, Chrysler had the legendary 426 HEMI, Pontiac had the Ram Air engines, Oldsmobile had the mighty 455 Rocket. And then there was Buick, a company better known for comfortable cruisers, luxury interiors, and quiet highway rides. The brand your grandfather drove. The car parked in country club lots, not the name scrawled on drag strip bathroom walls. Hardly anyone expected Buick to build one of the most brutal muscle car engines of the era. But what almost nobody knows is that Buick wasn't chasing horsepower. They were chasing something even more dangerous: torque. Raw, relentless, tire-destroying torque. And what happened next created an engine that became Detroit's undisputed torque king. The Buick 455 didn't just move cars, it twisted drive shafts, destroyed rear tires, and delivered a kind of instant acceleration that left competitors wondering what had just happened. Most people think muscle car history is all about horsepower numbers. The bigger the number, the better the car. That's what magazine covers promised. That's what showroom posters advertised. But the truth was always more complicated. You think you know this story? Not like this. To understand why the Buick 455 became such a legend, you have to go back to the late 1960s. America was obsessed with displacement. Bigger engines meant more power meant more sales. The formula seemed simple, almost too simple. Ford had its 428 Cobra Jet. Chevrolet unleashed the 427 and later the 454. Chrysler's street HEMI terrified drag strips across the country. Every manufacturer was locked in an arms race. Each year brought bigger numbers, higher compression ratios, wilder camshaft profiles, more aggressive advertising claims. Buick executives looked at the market and realized something important. Their customers weren't hardcore racers. They weren't kids buying their first muscle car. They were successful professionals, doctors, lawyers, business owners, people who had money to spend. They wanted luxury, they wanted comfort, but they also wanted the ability to embarrass nearly anything at a stoplight. That created a unique engineering challenge. How do you build an engine that feels effortless rather than frantic? How do you make a 2-ton luxury coupe accelerate like a race car? How do you deliver brutal performance without sacrificing refinement? The answer was torque. Massive amounts of torque. Not screaming horsepower at redline. Not temperamental race-bred power delivery. Just pure low-end thrust that arrived instantly and never let up. In 1970, Buick engineers introduced the 455 cubic inch V8. At first glance, it looked similar to other big block engines of the era. Cast iron block, cast iron heads, pushrod valve actuation. Nothing exotic or revolutionary on the surface. But under the surface, it was completely different. The engine used a massive 4.3125-inch bore, combined with a relatively short 3.90-inch stroke. That bore-to-stroke ratio was critical. It allowed for larger valves and better breathing. Total displacement came to 455 cubic inches, or 7.5 liters. Compression ratios varied by model, but performance versions ran as high as 10.51. Factory horsepower ratings ranged from 350 to 370 horsepower depending on configuration. Those numbers sounded impressive, but they weren't shocking. Competitors were claiming 400, 425, even 450 horsepower. The real story was torque. The Buick 455 produced an astonishing 510 pound-feet of torque, 510, in 1970, from a production engine you could order from a dealer. For comparison, Chevrolet's famous LS6 454 produced 500 pound-feet. The mighty street HEMI generated 490. Ford's Boss 429 made around 480. Buick had quietly built the most torque-rich production engine in Detroit, and they did it while weighing significantly less than most competing big blocks. The entire engine assembly came in lighter than expected, lighter than the HEMI, lighter than many other big blocks. That last detail would change everything, because power-to-weight ratio matters a lot. But there was a problem. Horsepower sells cars. Torque doesn't make magazine covers, at least not immediately. Enthusiast publications obsessed over peak horsepower figures. Advertisers knew that bigger numbers moved metal. Insurance companies calculated premiums based on horsepower ratings. Many enthusiasts ignored the Buick because its advertised horsepower figures looked modest compared to rivals. The GSX Stage 1, Buick's ultimate muscle machine, was officially rated at 360 horsepower, just 360. The HEMI was advertised at 425. The LS6 carried a terrifying 450 horsepower rating. Plymouth's Super Commando 6-pack claimed 390. On paper, Buick seemed outmatched, outgunned, irrelevant in the horsepower wars. In reality, those numbers were misleading, deliberately misleading in many cases, and the engineers knew it. They absolutely knew it. You see, during the muscle car era, manufacturers often manipulated horsepower ratings for insurance reasons, marketing reasons, and racing politics. Some brands inflated numbers to impress buyers. Others deflated them to avoid insurance penalties and racing restrictions. The whole system was dishonest, and everyone in the industry knew the game being played. Many experts believe the Stage 1's actual output exceeded 400 horsepower. Some dyno tests suggest figures closer to 410 or even 420 horsepower. Combined with 510 pound-feet of torque, the result was devastating. Absolutely devastating. Road testers quickly noticed something strange. The Buick felt faster than the numbers suggested. Much faster. Way faster than it had any right to feel. Magazine drivers reported brutal mid-range acceleration, the kind that slammed passengers into their seats, the kind that didn't require high RPM, the kind that didn't need a 4-speed manual and perfect clutch timing, the kind that made a car feel unstoppable. Even with an automatic transmission, the Buick pulled like nothing else. And that wasn't an accident. Buick engineers deliberately designed the engine for low-end and mid-range power. They sacrificed high RPM horsepower for instant response. They traded peak numbers for real-world usability. Peak torque arrived around 2,800 revolutions per minute. Most engines didn't hit peak torque until 3,500 or 4,000 revolutions per minute. That meant maximum thrust was available almost immediately, right off idle, before the secondaries even opened. While rival engines screamed towards 6,000 revolutions per minute, the Buick simply shoved hard, relentlessly, with a brutal linear power delivery that felt endless. One engineer reportedly described it as an electric motor with anger issues. That wasn't far from the truth. Electric motors deliver maximum torque instantly. The Buick 455 came surprisingly close to replicating that sensation. But the deeper you looked, the more impressive the engineering became. Most people assume big block power comes from brute force alone, just displacement and compression. The Buick 455 was smarter than that, much smarter. The engine featured unusually large ports and carefully optimized combustion chambers. Engineers worked extensively on airflow efficiency. Computational tools were primitive compared to today. But careful testing and development produced exceptional results. The Stage 1 package introduced larger valves, revised camshaft timing, improved breathing characteristics, and enhanced cylinder head design. The intake valves measured approximately 2.13 inches. Exhaust valves came in around 1.75 inches. Those were enormous for the era. The camshaft profile helped maximize cylinder filling without sacrificing street manners. Duration wasn't excessive. Lift was reasonable. Overlap stayed manageable. As a result, the engine produced enormous torque without becoming temperamental. It could idle smoothly, cruise comfortably at highway speeds, get decent fuel economy for a 455 cubic inch engine, then explode forward when the driver buried the throttle. That combination was rare, extremely rare. Most high-performance engines of the era were compromised: rough idle, poor drivability, terrible fuel economy. The Buick managed to avoid most of those pitfalls, but then the real challenge appeared: keeping all that torque under control. The Buick 455's greatest strength quickly became its biggest problem. Driveline failures started appearing. Rear tires vanished at alarming rates. Transmissions suffered under the load. Differentials complained. Axles occasionally surrendered. Some owners discovered that aggressive launches could literally twist components beyond their design limits. U-joints became consumable items. Clutches and manual-equipped cars faced brutal abuse. Even the heavy-duty automatic transmissions struggled occasionally. A mechanic from the era famously joked, "The engine wasn't the weak link, everything behind it was," and he wasn't exaggerating, not even slightly. Buick eventually upgraded driveline components in later Stage 1 models, stronger axles, improved differentials, better U-joints, but the early cars earned a reputation for eating parts. Quarter-mile testing revealed just how serious the situation had become. A properly tuned 1970 Buick GSX Stage 1 could run the quarter mile in approximately 13.3 to 13.5 seconds. Trap speeds often exceeded 105 miles per hour. Those numbers placed it among the fastest production cars in America, faster than most people expected from a Buick. Some independent tests achieved even quicker times, especially with slick tires and optimized tuning. Cars running in the high 12-second range weren't uncommon. A few modified examples dipped into the 12.0-second range. Remember, this was a full-size muscle car loaded with luxury features, not a stripped race car. Air conditioning was available. Power windows and seats were optional. Full instrumentation came standard. A comfortable street machine, yet it was capable of humiliating competitors costing similar money and embarrassing cars that looked far more aggressive. Speaking of money, a GSX package added roughly $1,100 to the car's price in 1970, a substantial amount at the time. The average new car cost around $3,500, so the GSX represented a significant investment. Only around 678 GSX models were produced for the 1970 model year. Of those, just a fraction received the coveted Stage 1 package. Exact numbers vary depending on sources, but somewhere between 400 and 500 Stage 1 cars were built. Production remained low throughout the model's life. Today, surviving examples command six-figure prices, sometimes far more. Well-preserved original cars regularly exceed $150,000. Concours-quality examples have sold for over $200,000. Collectors understand exactly what they represent. A brief moment when Buick built something truly special, something unexpected, something that challenged every assumption about the brand. But perhaps the most fascinating part of the story happened at the drag strip, because torque changes everything. Horsepower determines ultimate speed, top-end velocity, trap speed through the timing lights. Torque determines how violently you get there, how hard the car launches, how quickly it accelerates from a stop. Drivers quickly learned that the Buick's secret weapon wasn't top-end performance. It was launch performance. 60-foot times were exceptional. The car hooked and went. When the light turned green, the 455 delivered instant force. The car didn't need to wait for RPM. It didn't need aggressive clutch slipping. It simply surged forward, like a switch had been thrown. Competitors often found themselves looking at Buick taillights before realizing the race had even started. The psychological impact was significant. Nobody expected to lose to a Buick. One magazine writer described the sensation as being rear-ended by a freight train. Another called it the strongest street engine Detroit ever built. Yet another said it delivered more usable power than anything else on the road. Those weren't marketing slogans, those were reactions. Genuine impressions from experienced automotive journalists, people who had driven everything, and then everything changed. Because while Buick engineers were perfecting torque, the world around them was changing dramatically. Insurance companies had begun targeting muscle cars. Young buyers faced premiums that sometimes exceeded the car payment. Rates doubled or tripled for high-performance models. Some insurers refused coverage entirely. Premiums skyrocketed. Government regulators started focusing on emissions. The Clean Air Act was coming. Unleaded fuel mandates loomed on the horizon. Safety regulations increased costs and complexity. Fuel economy concerns grew louder every year. The 1973 oil crisis was approaching. Gas prices would soon shock American consumers. The golden age of muscle cars was ending, faster than anyone in Detroit expected. The The 1971 model year brought lower compression ratios. Performance began to decline. Engines were detuned to run on lower octane fuel. Power outputs dropped across the industry. The era of high-compression, big cubic inch monsters was fading away. By 1972, manufacturers switched from gross horsepower ratings to net horsepower ratings. Numbers dropped overnight. The Buick 455 Stage 1 now advertised just 270 net horsepower. Not because engines suddenly became weaker, but because measurement standards became more realistic, more honest. Gross ratings measured power at the flywheel with no accessories. Net ratings measured power with all accessories and exhaust systems attached. The new numbers were more accurate, but they looked terrible on paper. Still, emissions equipment and lower compression eventually reduced performance substantially. The Buick 455 survived for several more years. It remained in production through the mid-1970s. But the magic was disappearing. Year by year, model by model, compression ratios fell, power outputs declined. The wild personality that defined the original Stage 1 gradually faded. By 1975, the Stage 1 option was gone. The 455 continued in detuned form, but the spirit had departed. Production of the Buick 455 ultimately ended during the mid-1970s. An era had come to an end. The muscle car dream was over, at least for a generation, but legends don't disappear that easily. In fact, the Buick 455's reputation only grew stronger with time. Racers discovered its potential. The engine's robust bottom end could handle serious power. The large bore allowed for big valves and excellent airflow. Engine builders pushed the platform far beyond factory limits. Aftermarket cylinder heads, forged internals, roller camshafts, and modern fuel systems unlocked incredible power. Some modified builds now exceed 700 horsepower naturally aspirated. Turbocharged combinations have gone far beyond that. Numbers approaching 4 digits aren't uncommon in serious racing applications. Yet enthusiasts still talk about torque first. Always torque, because that's what made the engine special. Not peak horsepower numbers, not advertising claims, not racing trophies. The feeling, the instant relentless surge that started the moment you touched the throttle. The sensation of being pushed back into your seat. The sound of tires struggling for traction. The feeling that the car had far more power than the chassis could manage. Even today, modern performance cars with far higher horsepower figures struggle to recreate that sensation. Electronic throttle control smooths response. Traction control limits wheel spin. Advanced transmissions optimize power delivery. Everything is refined and controlled. The raw, unfiltered experience is gone. That's why collectors obsess over Stage 1 GSX. That's why Buick enthusiasts speak about the 455 with almost religious reverence. And that's why the engine continues to occupy a unique place in American automotive history. The Buick 455 wasn't the highest revving engine Detroit built. It wasn't the most exotic. It wasn't the most famous. It didn't win championships or set drag strip records. But pound for pound, it delivered something few rivals could match. Pure, effortless, tire-shredding torque, more torque than anything else in its era, delivered in a way that felt almost supernatural. In the end, that's the hidden truth behind the Buick 455. While everyone else was chasing horsepower headlines, Buick engineers focused on what drivers actually felt. They understood that peak numbers don't tell the whole story. They knew that torque creates the sensation of speed, the feeling of power, the experience that makes a car memorable. The result was 455 cubic inches of American V8 muscle, producing 510 pound-feet of torque, and enough low-end power to humble engines with much bigger reputations. An engine that could pull from idle like an electric motor. An engine that made luxury cars feel like drag racers. An engine that rewrote assumptions about what Buick could build. That's why the Buick 455 became Detroit's torque king, and decades later, its legend is still growing. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments which forgotten muscle car engine you want to see next. And make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the machines, rivalries, and engineering secrets that shaped automotive history.